Hello guys and welcome to the next video. In this one we are going to tackle a small change that came in the ES6 and that is called default parameters. So to explain it, let's first of all create like environment. Let's say that we are building a function that is supposed to add some amount that we pass via arguments to some number. Okay, so let's start by writing it. So I'm going to use like totally like vanilla JavaScript here. So I'm going to say function, let's call it add2. Let's put parameters in there. We want to have two parameters. First is going to be amount of something to add, and the next is going to be like base, like where to add that amount, pretty much. So if you think about it, this function should pretty much return back to us amount plus base. Okay, and if I console.log and I call it, and let's say I provide like for the amount I say like 10 and for the base I say 5. So we should get back like 15 as a value. And we do. But now let me pose an interesting question. Like, let's create this function in a way that even if the second argument isn't specified, we will then simply add this amount to 0. So if I write 10, 5, we get 15, but if I just write 10, I just want to get 10 back. So how can we do that? Well, before ES6 you could do something like this. You could say base is equal to the value base if it is defined, otherwise define it yourself here. So we can say 0 here. So this will pretty much be like, if the base hasn't been defined, then assign 0 value to the base, otherwise just use the value that we received from that argument. So now if I test this function over here, I can run it again and see we get 15. That's great. But if I get rid of this second argument and I run this once again, we should see 10. And this works like as we want it to work, but this isn't really like the nicest looking syntax ever. So ES6 now has a feature that is called default parameters, and you can pretty much do the exact same thing by getting rid of this line over here and setting this base to equal whatever value you want to be assigned to the base by default. So we can say 0 like this. Now if we get rid of this old code and I again run this function, we should see that it works as it used to. So that's a small change, and it's really easy like to learn it. Just a few things that you should be aware of. If you set the first parameter to a default value, let's say we don't want to set base to default value, but we want amount. Let's say we want, if not specified, amount to be like 50. Then if you just call it, first of all let's call it with no argument and let's see what happens. So what happened is we got not a number. Why? Well, amount got assigned to 50, but we didn't specify any, we didn't pass argument for base, and we also didn't initialize base to some default value, so this had a value of undefined, and then JavaScript tried to add 50 to undefined, and that pretty much resulted in not a number. So we can console.log here and say amount, so we can see what's inside like this, and we can try it again. And like I said, amount is 50, base is undefined, and that's the reason why we got not a number. Now of course you can also specify default value for a base. We can say like 100, and now if I call it with no arguments, we should see 150. Okay, but what you need to be aware of, if you set the first parameter to some value, you don't specify default value for the second argument, and you simply pass one value to this function, let's say 75. What will happen is it will still just override this first parameter. It's not going to be like, oh, I see the first one has default value, the second one doesn't, so let me send this 75 to a second. No, but what will happen is it will simply map this value to the first parameter over here. So what happens is, as you can see in the terminal, the amount gets assigned to 75 and the base is still undefined. So that's just something to be aware of. It's easier if you rearrange your parameters in a way that those later, like to the right, have default values, while those on the front doesn't have, because then you can clearly omit them, like in this example. This example, base will be 100 and amount will be 75. Okay, so this is just a quick lesson. This is pretty easy to get a grasp on, and it's pretty neat, and it can save you some keystrokes. As you've seen, like without the addition of this default parameters feature, you had pretty much to type something like this, which was ugly to begin with, and it would simply clutter your code even more. So I hope you enjoyed this video and that you're learning something, and I'll see you in the next one.